everybody. Welcome to, I guess we're going to call it the Let's Talk Student Ministry Podcast or the Student Ministry Podcast. I don't know. The name is still under works. Welcome to the Cypress Cafe. This is where we host youth group and is also my office, and it is also where we're going to be filming today. It's also actually where we meet for our young adults ministry. This is the multi-purpose room, if you want to call it that. My name is Noah. I'm the student ministry pastor over at Tesh Baptist Church. I am also one of the co-hosts.
Yeah, I'm Nikki Lee. I'm one of the youth leaders here at Tesh Baptist, and I guess I'm also a co-host.
Also, women's Sunday school, girls Sunday school teacher, and also bestie for life. Bump it. There we go. In case y'all are wondering, this is supposed to fuel my caffeine addiction. So we have my Diet Coke, and then because the Diet Coke has no sugar, I have the sugary coffee because that makes sense.
You know, or you could just drink Coke.
What if I poured the Coke in and mixed it up, make it
nasty?
What is that called? Bullet coffee?
Oh, not with Diet Coke.
You ever heard of bullet coffee?
Yeah, that's oil and something else.
You remember whenever Starbucks used to mix, was it avocado oil, like olive oil, with coffee, and it's all because Selena Gomez said something? Or was it Selena Gomez?
I don't know if it was Selena Gomez, but I know I used MCT oil for a long time in my coffee.
I remember people were like, why is it that whenever I drink this, it makes me want to go to the bathroom so bad? And it's because it's oil on top of oil. Like, that's all it is.
With caffeine.
I mean, coffee really is just like bean oil mixed with water.
Right.
That's just that's exactly what tea is. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I love
tea is
coffee.
actually stronger in caffeine though.
Mm-hmm. So anyways, this is the podcast. I guess we can figure out a name in post whenever we're editing this thing. But we're here to talk about student ministry. We're hoping to film on Fridays as far as whenever we release. That's still under works. I'm really hoping that in this video, in this episode, that you guys kind of get the vibe of like, hey, we're still kind of figuring this out, because we are still kind of putting together the setup. We might get a new camera. We might get microphones or something to have better audio. We're definitely kind of actually in the process right now of redecorating the youth room, and so this background might not be the background forever. However, I really do mess with this logo. I like that logo a lot. Shout out to Isabella Broussard for designing the new Tesh Student Ministry logo.
Yeah, it's real good. Great.
Yeah, so for those of you who are not from this area, which I'm actually hoping that this not only reaches people from our youth ministry, but also people from all over, because I don't know about y'all, but I like listening to podcasts. I like listening to pastors and other ministry leaders talk about ministry. For those of you who are not from this area, we are from Breaux Bridge, Louisiana. We meet up on Wednesday nights at 6:30. We actually open the doors at 5:30, even though people like to show up at 5. We open the doors at 5:30. We have coffee. We have drinks. We're probably going to start stocking up other snacks and everything in the fridge. Board games and everything. And at 6:30 is whenever we actually start worship. We'll have a moment of discipleship talk. That's where Miss Nikki will lead that. We'll have 2 worship songs, and then I'll usually give a sermon. And I'm assuming that what we do is good because people keep coming back to it.
I guess that's a good assumption.
I guess it's a good assumption. But all jokes aside, this youth ministry is amazing. Mm-hmm. It is something that I've never seen before. And in a second, I'd like to kind of share the story about how we were able to build this ministry, because what's most amazing about this is that it's something that we both built from the ground up. And I mean, I guess saying we is me being humble. It really was just me at the beginning until Michelle came on board, and then
you just slashed that humility in half.
We could tell the story in a second, but how about we start by kind of talking about ourselves? Would you like to start? Or do you think I should start?
Oh, you can start. I thought we were going to do it all started with a apple and a dream.
Well, I'll start actually with the woman and an apple. Way back in the day. Whenever ministry became necessary, when that fruit was eaten, and then sin entered into the world.
All right, so you start. Tell us about yourself, Noah Bello.
So yes, you heard my name is Noah Bello. I was born in 2001. That always makes people feel weird when I say that.
Makes people old.
I know, especially because I feel old.
And I feel young.
I think being in youth ministry did that, because I remember when I started in youth ministry, I felt way too young and inexperienced to do it. And that was only a few years ago. And now I feel like I've aged 10, even 20 years since we started. So I don't know. But anyways, my name is Noah Bello. I was born in Opelousas, Louisiana. I was raised in Lafayette, Louisiana. I went to school in Lafayette, Louisiana, graduated from Lafayette Christian Academy in 2020 during COVID years. In fact, I didn't have a senior prom because that was, during the time of the lockdown. I grew up in church, so
that was the time for COVID?
2020, yeah.
I really feel old. I feel so old.
That was 5 years ago, girl. I think what happened was the quarantine is what created, it definitely is what shaped the online culture we have today, and that's what created a lot of jobs. In fact, that might even be the reason why we felt the need to start a podcast, if you really want to look back.
Yeah. And we think what we have to say is really important.
Keyword on the word think.
Okay, so keep telling us about yourself.
All right, so so I was actually raised in church at First Baptist Church of Lafayette. I gave my life to Christ very young. I gave my life to Christ at a Chinese restaurant that currently does not exist anymore. I remember I was 6 years old and I asked my mom, how do I go to heaven? And she walked me through it. And so my story, as I like to say all the time, is not a story of somebody who went through a major event and at the end of the movie they gave their life to Christ. I was the one who started out the movie already saved. But my story is more about, and I'd like to maybe one day get deeper into my story, because today I'm kind of just giving a brief overview, but my story is actually about somebody who wandered around through life, claiming that he was wandering aimlessly, not realizing that Jesus was by his side the entire time. So I got baptized multiple times and then realized later on that the first baptism was good enough. I felt a call to ministry when I was 17, because at this point I'd been just going to church regularly, kind of off and on. There were seasons when I didn't go because I didn't feel like it, getting connected with my local youth group. And whenever I was in high school, I went to a Christian school that did not have a Bible study. And I thought that was weird, because at the time I was just now starting to get into studying the Bible. My mentor at the time, and currently my best friend, one of my best friends, is a guy named Joey Jackson, who challenged me to study the book of Ephesians, and I did, and it changed my life. And so, if anybody wants homework, I would tell you to read and study the book of Ephesians. It's fantastic. Anyways, my older youth students actually make fun of me because of how often I quote Ephesians. I keep telling them it's my favorite book of the Bible, and it will. Maybe not always, but for now, it is my favorite book of the Bible. And part of it is because that's when I started taking my faith seriously. I learned how to study the Bible. I learned what God actually had to say. And, studying the book of Ephesians, they got me wanting to teach people how to read the Bible. And so I remember thinking, man, it's weird how, this school that we're at, that's a Christian school, doesn't have a Bible study. And so I talked to...
that is weird.
I talked to Joey Jackson, who was a homeschool teacher, who was my homeroom teacher, and I said we should start a Bible study. We called it Knights for Christ because we were the Knights, Lafayette Christian Academy Knights. And I'm very proud of the fact that it's been probably 7 years since I started it, and it is still going strong today. In fact, it's an officially recognized on-campus ministry at Lafayette Christian Academy. And so I started that with a small group of people. Every Thursday during lunch, we'd meet up in there in his classroom, and then we'd read through a passage of the Bible. And that was about it. I felt a call to ministry in doing that because I realized I could do this for the rest of my life. I talked to my youth pastor, and then he said, I could see it in you. And so he started discipling me. In the meantime, Joey Jackson was also discipling me, so I was kind of getting dual discipled at the time. Graduated from high school, moved to Arkansas because I wanted to play college football. God changed my mind whenever I hurt my knees. I moved back home after my first year. And when I moved back, around the time my youth pastor had actually left to go pastor somewhere else, and First Baptist hired somebody else to be the youth pastor, and he came in looking to hire an intern. And the first guy he wanted to hire happened to be a student that felt called to ministry, which was me. So I came in as the youth intern, worked as the youth intern for about a year, and then 6 months after the internship ended, I'm so wrong. I worked as the intern for 6 months, and then 6 months after the internship was over, is when my pastor called me and asked me to come in and lead a youth class at Tesh Baptist Church. And what I did not expect is that not only would I commit to an entire full-time career of ministry, but I would also commit to attending seminary, which I currently am doing, and end up committing to this church. Because originally his idea was that I'd do this for 2 years and then graduate and move on, and he'd find someone else. And then I guess nobody saw the growth coming after that, and we'll talk about that in a second, but I want to hear Miss Nikki's story now.
Yeah, well, I was born in 1985, so I'm a bit older.
Wonderful.
I just turned 40, but my story, my Christ journey is a little bit different. So I was a VBS kid, right? So I found Christ at VBS.
And what is VBS?
Vacation Bible School.
Mm-hmm.
We do it every summer. It's actually a ministry that I feel very called to because of how it changed my life as a kid. Now, I was a kid who I struggled with a lot of emotional instability because of my home life, and I grew up just trying to find people who loved me, and so as I grew up, I ended up in a youth group, which is why youth ministry is so important to me. My youth minister, Shelley Baker, as an adult came to me and came to church one day, and I remember her opening her Bible with my name, and she said, "I knew a few of you would always end up in ministry," which is crazy because, with me as a teenager, I was both going to youth group, but also a wild child. So the fact that she just knew in her heart that I would work in ministry one day is a God thing. So, but I was young, I thought I found Jesus, but my life didn't change. And then of course we would go to youth events, and I would think I'd give my life over to Jesus then. I'm not a little bit different than you, where I didn't find him as a kid. I thought I did. I loved what Jesus represented, and I loved the communities that I found. And, I struggled a lot with substance abuse, and ended up, my dad died when I was 17. I was very close, and that kind of broke me a little, so that I kind of left the church. I grew up in the church. I was always in the church despite being a wild child. Right before I went to college, my father died, and I just kind of got angry. And I was angry for a long time and started drinking. And then one day I had a friend who said, "Hey, you want to go to church?" And a few months prior to that, I was getting ready to get married. And this was a long time ago, almost 16, 17 years ago. I was getting ready to get...
been 7 years old.
That is crazy.
I turned 24 very soon.
Oh.
Which is weird.
So I've almost been at Tesh as long as you've been alive.
I love that.
So, but anyway, so this lady came into a gym. I was working out at the time, and was talking about an Alzheimer's paper I was doing in college. And her husband had Alzheimer's, and she said, "Oh, you need to go to this church I go to," and it was Tesh Baptist. And I said, "Oh no, I got a lot going on. Maybe when I get married and everything settles down." But I had no intention. I was still pretty mad at God. And then a couple months later, in March 28th, my friend said, "Hey, I'm going to go to this church. I think you should come." And we've been friends for a long time. And I said, "Oh, I can't, because I need to go to this church I promised this lady 6 months ago or 4 months ago that I would go to her church if I went to a church, and I want to stick to that." And I said, "Well, which one is it?" And she said, "It's Tesh Baptist on the corner." And that was the same church that Beverly Whitaker, who's still a member here, had asked me to go to. And I thought, well, I guess I got to go now. And so I remember walking through the doors, and I tell everybody it could have been an air vent, a return air vent, but when I walked through the doors, I felt like the Holy Spirit hit me in the face, like I was back. And it was kind of that moment where I realized that God was just waiting for me to get over myself.
Yeah.
And so I walked in the door, and from that moment, I never left. I was here every Wednesday, every Sunday. My family didn't understand this sudden need to be at church all the time and miss things, and I just felt so dedicated. And a few months in, I was a chaperone on a youth trip. And I was still drinking at the time. And my pastor...
Brother Joe Arnold.
No.
Was it Joe Arnold?
Joe Jenkins.
Joe Jenkins.
Papa Joe.
Oh, sorry. Joe Arnold is... We can cut that.
Pastor Joe Jenkins, who I call Papa Joe and Mama Martha, sat me down, and I said, I'm so in love with, youth ministry. Just these kids, they make me feel alive and young. I mean, I was 20, So, and he said, look, I want you to serve, but you can't serve until you get sober. And I remember going, how did he know? But I got sober.
It's called the Holy Spirit.
I know. But I think the beautiful thing was he said, I know because it takes one to know one. And so he had been sober for, 40 years, and he saw it in me, and he didn't push me aside. He said, hey, go get sober and do what God called you to do. And that's what I did. And I've been here ever since. And I was in youth ministry. I do VBS every summer. I had no intention of getting back into youth ministry after my first bout with it. And then here comes one Sunday, Brother Reggie came to me and said, hey, I've got this youth, this guy coming to lead our youth, to grow our youth. I need you to be nice to him. And I was like, okay. And I remember he walked through the door, I'm 5'2", and he's
6'7".
So he walks through the door and he walks, and I'm just like
those kids
hi.
say, 6'7".
I'm like, hi. Hello.
Hello.
So I don't know. We kind of just clicked from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he just drugged me into it like a year after. He was like, he kept just...
Well, I kept pestering you, and then you finally agreed.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful that I did, because I couldn't love this ministry. I couldn't love this youth group more.
And it's really interesting how much has changed since you came. And I don't know if it's because you came or if it's just something that happened afterwards. But then after you came, Justin got involved, and now we have 2 male leaders and 2 female leaders, and now Emily is getting involved. For those of you who don't know, Emily is my lovely and beautiful fiance, and her other best friend. But Emily actually claims my best friend title from me. So you're kind of second, maybe even third, because I also have a roommate.
I'm just kidding.
I'm just gonna start slowly talking.
I'm actually not his best friend at all. No.
We actually hate each other. One thing I really love about your testimony, Nikki, is that honestly, you didn't clean yourself up before you started going to church. Like, you wanted to, but something else pulled you in, and obviously I think that's the Holy Spirit. I pulled out my Bible because I was trying to find a passage, but I couldn't remember where it was. But it was a passage whenever Jesus calls somebody and he says, hey, be my disciple, and then he says, well, let me go and say goodbye to my family first. And then Jesus says, oh man, I can't even try to paraphrase him, that he basically says you have to be willing to let go. You have to be willing to drop everything and leave. You have to be willing to leave things unfinished. And I think that's something that, and I didn't intend for this to be a lesson today, but I think that's something we can all think about, is that when God calls us to lead, to follow him, he's calling us to take up our cross daily and to drop everything. You really don't have to have everything together. You don't have to be sober. You don't have to be accepted in your friend group. You don't have to be loved by your family. You literally just have to make the decision, and then you can drop everything mid-game and just go. You can walk off the football field in the middle of the third quarter if you want to, and keep going. I wouldn't recommend actually doing that. I'm talking about metaphorically.
I don't know if it's that important, but to that point, that's what Brother Joe said was, look, you can be in ministry, but you have to walk away from all the things of the world that you currently do. And so, this church is that. This group, and that's what we do with our youth. We're very honest with our youth, and we're open about brokenness and mental health, and we have no claim to these kids where we want them to be perfect. Quite the opposite.
And I'm really glad that you're saying that, because it actually transitions us into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is what our Hearts for Ministry is, which actually kind of walks into what the whole point of this podcast is. But we'll get to that part in a second. But yeah, I started youth ministry off just because I felt called to ministry, and as I got more involved and got to know these kids, I realized that one thing that's common among everybody is brokenness. and maybe it's just because of the area that we're in, but there's a lot of stuff, brokenness happening in the families, at the homes, addiction, substance abuse, all that stuff. Just other forms of abuse. We have kids coming in here.
Abandonment.
Completely abandoned. Like, we have some kids. I was telling Nikki earlier that we had a group of kids that came in and started getting involved a few weeks ago. They didn't learn how to read until maybe a couple years ago. Their dad still doesn't know how to read, and that's no disrespect to them. It's just an image of education is mostly free nowadays, and that's still happening, you know. And I guess part of that is the fact that we're in the heart of Louisiana, but which is one of the most unchurched regions in the world, which is interesting because of how much church is over here. But
it's also interesting how in South Louisiana you have a Catholic church on every corner, but in North Louisiana you have a Baptist or Methodist church on every corner. So it's very different. Louisiana is the melting pot for everything. The church, you know, culture. It's very different.
You know what's interesting is that I actually talked about that with my Uncle Gary. His name Gary Mitchell. He was the pastor at a very small church called Chautauqua Baptist that had less than 100 people. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. But me and him actually talked about that when I just got into ministry. And I remember him. The last thing that he ever told me was that he's proud of me, and it was in this conversation because then I got into ministry, and then I was too busy to basically visit him, and then he passed away unexpectedly. Well, I guess it really wasn't that unexpected, but for me it was. Anyways, we were talking about how it's interesting how this is such an unchurched area, but there's so many churches. And then he said because of this culture that we've created as churches and as Christians to where our radius doesn't go past our own front yard. We are so focused on getting people in and just kind of keeping the doors open on Sundays and Wednesdays, doing worship on Sundays, doing worship on Wednesday nights. Like, discipleship has completely been thrown out the door for a lot of churches.
And outreach has too.
Outreach has. One of the reasons why I have such a heart for youth ministry is because I'm realizing that youth ministry is probably one of the ministries that gets the least amount of attention nowadays, and yet it's one of the most important.
Especially the transition from youth to college. You lose so many of those, that age group.
In fact, that's actually why whenever I got involved with this ministry, I actually started a college ministry as well. Because statistically speaking, like the age that you're at whenever you're most likely to either become a Christian and be all in for Christ for the rest of your life or completely walk away, you're most likely to do that between the ages of 12 and 25. Basically youth and young adult age. And yet those are the two ministries that don't get a lot of attention. And the reason is because they don't bring in the most money.
Right, they're very expensive.
They're very expensive ministries. And, you know, I'm not saying this to bash any other churches, but, you know, I think that's just a common problem across the board. We have churches that aren't really willing to stick their neck out there for youth pastors or for young adult pastors and everything and spend that kind of money. But imagine if we had a team of youth pastors across the whole country that was all in for Christ, giving 100% of their time to these kids, spending time with them outside of school, outside of youth, you know, discipling them, and then actually creating an environment for young adults and for them when they graduate.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that would be, I think that's what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. We're trying to see what works.
Well, to be honest with you, my heart for ministry is, I've always believed that the world needs to be changed one person at a time. Mm-hmm. We live in a very complex political scheme right now, to the point that I don't even feel like talking about politics anymore with anyone, no matter which side they're on. People think that you got to vote the right guy into office in order to change the world. You got to spend this much money in order to change the world. But what I've learned over time is that every time, if you wake up in the morning and you go to a coffee shop and you tell the person behind the counter, have a good day, you just change the world even a little bit.
Yeah, you just kind of love like Jesus does. You're kind. You love people where they are. Mm-hmm. It's kind of what we do.
And imagine how much change could happen if, Jesus had his 12 and they changed the world. Imagine what would happen if just a team of youth pastors just woke up every morning choosing to give 100% of their effort to these kids, to showing as much love as possible to this generation, to serve the community, to serve the local schools, and to not just be with them on Wednesday nights to teach a lesson, but also
to be there for them all the time.
Be there for them all the time. Have your phones on, at midnight to answer phone calls or to be willing to go and visit them. And I know I'm asking a lot out of people, but like I said, the world changes one person at a time. And that's my heart for youth ministry.
Yeah, I think, one of the things you say that, phone all the time on midnight, I think that's why they trust us so much. I mean, I made a joke not long ago. I was tired. We'd had a lot going on here, and I told all my girls who will text me. Sometimes I think they are only awake at midnight to 2 a.m. I'm like, hey, I just need y'all to not have a crisis tonight so I can get some sleep. And but the truth is they know that we'll answer, and they know that we're there. And I don't know that a lot of youth ministries have those people who were like parents to these kids, because they don't, some of them don't have a traditional household. Well, most of ours don't. That's one of the things that's unique. And really, from my heart for ministry comes from the fact that we have, we have a lot of kids who have come through the door, but we have about 36 to 40 that are regulars. And 90% of them have these stories that are so broken. And, you just want to love them back to life and love them to Jesus. And you can't help but see the impact when you love someone. And we're teaching them to love people, and that's important.
It's really, what I think is really cool, thinking back on my own life, my own testimony, I was incredibly blessed with the family I was given, with the home life I was given. My parents loved each other and have one of the healthiest relationships I've ever seen. My grandparents were in love and romantic all the way to the end. And I feel like those are things you don't really see much anymore. In fact, I was telling my fiance earlier today that it really bothers me that it's so common for people to make fun of the people they love. Like, why are you posting videos of you ridiculing your wife or your husband online? I thought you loved them. And I realized that it's because I come from, admittedly, a very idealistic, suburban, white family. You know what I mean?
Right.
But because of that, I feel like I feel like I was able to grow up in the environment that God intended for us to grow up in. And then, what's really interesting is the fact that I think being involved in this ministry, I was able to see what the world actually looks like, and part of it was probably the time that I spent living away from home. I guess I'm really starting to describe myself. I'm starting to sound like Bruce Wayne here, but but yeah, like the time I spent away from home, and also just like the more that I study the Bible, I reading the book of Acts, reading the letters that Paul writes, I realize that there is a picture of the church that the Bible sets that our church today is not following. When I say our church, I don't mean Tesh, I mean churches in general are not following the picture that the Bible sets for the church. And the family structure is not what the Bible sets for the family. And so I guess what I'm saying is that I'm very blessed to have given the life that I grew up with so that I can guide people into being able to create that home life on their own. I do something now where every time there's a student that ends up in a relationship, I offer relationship counseling, because it is genuinely my desire for these kids that if they get married, it's not just, I want them to meet someone and fall in love and get married. I want them to have a healthy home. I want the fathers to be good examples for their kids and good standards for their daughters. You know what I mean?
I do, yeah. It's very important. I mean, one of the things that we make sure that we encourage is, these are youth age kids, so they are in relationships, and we talk about that, and let's talk about it on Wednesdays some nights, and just like, I love y'all, but this is not the love of your life, probably. I hope it is, but if it is, that relationship needs to look like Jesus. And we try to teach them that. And I actually love that you come from that kind of a background, and I don't. I come from a home that was broken, and it is not now. I have a wonderful mother and a wonderful stepfather, but I didn't grow up that way, and which is the reason why I strive to teach kids how to love, how to be loved, and you reinforce what a family should look like from experience. I reinforce what a family should look like from a different experience, but for the same reason.
I just want to point out that we keep using the words family and love and all this stuff when we're talking about ministry, and there's a couple reasons I like to do that. First of all, in Ephesians, the way that Paul lays out the layout of the church, he says in Ephesians 5, he describes what the relationship between the husband and wife should be. But what's interesting is at the end of that passage where he says, husbands, love your wife like Christ loved the church. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. But at the end, he says, I am not talking about families. I'm talking about Christ and his church. Right. And Paul uses the same kind of method that Christ uses when he talks, which is that it needs to be taken both at face value, but also you have to find the second meaning as well. Right. And so the face value meaning is that, okay, well, he's talking about how husbands need to respond to their wife, but he's also talking about how the church leadership needs to be responding to other church leadership, or the people to the people. And so I've come to believe that the church has to reflect the family, and the family has to reflect the church. And so if you're going to tackle how to build a healthy church, we have to talk about how to build a healthy family, which
I agree.
The last little bit of evidence I have for that is actually in 1 Timothy chapter 3, when it talks about a pastor. And it said, what kind of pastor can maintain a church if he cannot maintain his own home?
Well, I've jokingly said over the years, not really jokingly, but if you can't make it work with two people in your household, how are you going to make it work in ministry? Mm-hmm. Because if you can't figure out conflict behind the doors, you're not going to be able to figure it out with 200 people.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people who have healthy ministries and bad home lives. They do make it work, but you have to be able to. Marriage is the picture of Christ and the church. That was by design.
I feel like one day we can actually talk in detail about what, like, a healthy view of biblical marriage, and we're not exactly there for that, so we're going to get there one day. Mm-hmm. But what is most important in building a ministry, in my mind, is building a healthy, Christ-centered family community, a home away from home. Mm-hmm. And so I have that heart for the youth. And then you mentioned earlier that one of the problems, not just with us, but with a lot of churches, is that once you graduate, where do you go?
Yeah.
And so I started a young adult ministry, and we meet every Thursday night at 6:30. I have a meal ready. From 7 to 8, we do worship, and then we'll do a short sermon, and then we'll do breakout groups. And before and after, we'll play games, and we'll have time together. And we're finally at a place where we're big enough to start doing events, and so I'm very excited about that. But the main goal that I'm building with this young adult ministry is that this is a community. This is a place that you can go that's yours. It meets on a Thursday when nothing else happens on Thursdays, at least at this church. It's
the one day of week nothing happens.
It's the one day of the week. Well, I guess we do have the men's nights that happen occasionally. But it's building an environment for people ages 18 to 25 to connect with other 18 to 25-year-olds, whether they go to church, whether they're anything. If you are 18 or 25 and you can't make it on a Thursday, I do encourage you to come swing by any time of the week, because I'm always here, and just hang out and do homework in the student building, the Cypress Cafe, if you want to call us that. As I said, I think the world changes one person at a time. If we can build a Christ-centered community here, we can reach the outward community and send it out in Christ as well.
Yeah, it's definitely important to have so that ministry, because people who've never been to church, I've heard a lot of people call us like we're holy rollers, or we don't just come in here and we're not pompous, and it's important for us to have a ministry that's comfortable, mm-hmm. and that we talk and we communicate, and we don't talk above people. We talk, you can know all the theology in the world, but if you can't meet people at their level, which is why I think a lot of the students here, at least for us, love coming here, because we reach them on their level. And then when you get to young adults, you reach them on their level. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that's important, is that you don't walk through these doors like on a Sunday and you just hear somebody talking about something you can never understand.
Yeah.
It is about reaching one person at a time, but it's also about reaching one person at a time where they are and how they understand. You said earlier, we have some kids in here that can't read. Mm-hmm. And we have some kids in here who are incredibly, above our intelligence. And so we have to be able to...
You, Elijah. Sorry.
So we have to be able to meet all of them at that where they are, and that's not always easy, but it's important that we do it.
And I'm glad you said the thing about theology, because one thing that I'm thankful for is a few years ago, I went to something called Collegiate Week. Shout out Collegiate Week. In fact, if there's listeners in here that have been there, we can all agree it's probably one of the most amazing ministry experiences ever, and part of the reason why I love college ministry so much. But anyways, while I was there was a seminar that was headed by my own seminary, New Orleans Baptist, and the seminar was why learn theology. And what I really loved is that when he was talking about theology, he said, you don't learn theology to be smarter than everybody. You don't learn theology to be a better preacher, although it does help. You don't learn theology so that you can just know more about God. You learn theology in the same reason why you want to learn more about your wife or your husband. You see, we are built to love God and to love Christ. And so there are deeper things about Christ that not even we can understand. And so what this taught me was that if I'm not pursuing a study of theology or a study of dogmatics or hermeneutics and all that stuff with the sole purpose of learning to glorify Christ more, then I'm learning for the wrong reason.
Well, and to be honest, when I first started my journey in theology, it was more so when I was growing up in high school, I just had a love for I just wanted to learn everything and just have a thirst for knowledge, period. And I remember studying Buddhism and Christianity and Judaism, and I just wanted to know all the things. And because I wanted to make a decision based on, I'm the kind of person who never wants the wool pulled over her eyes. So she needs to learn. And so when I started on my journey of understanding theology, and it was because I have blind faith. I believe in Jesus Christ 100%, and I don't necessarily need theology to believe in Jesus Christ. But what I did start learning theology for was because I wanted to be able to hear a message and know that it was from Christ and not from man. And understanding the context of that. Hermeneutics was probably the biggest change, the biggest study changer for me, because context, I never thought of it until I started studying hermeneutics. This doesn't parallel apply today because of context. So, it just becomes important to understand your faith and that you don't get led astray.
One of the most mind-blowing stuff, I guess to kind of explain what I mean by using theology to learn to appreciate Christ more, I love to read the writings of the church fathers in the patristic era. And Patrick of Ireland, some people call him St. Patrick, said something that to me has completely reshaped the way I view the Trinity. And it turns out he's probably what a lot of people don't even realize. This is where they get their understanding from. Patrick of Ireland coined the term, the Trinity needs to be understood as three separate persons, one equal being. Separate in person, equal in being. And so you have the one being, which is God, and then you have the person of the Father, the person of the Son, and the person of the Holy Spirit. And whenever you read that and you hear that and you realize that this is all one shared being, which is God, but this separate personality, thought process, intelligence, they all are separate but one. And now with that, you read the book of Genesis, you read the Psalms that talk about the multiple lords, or you talk about the great Father and his Son that you must pay homage to, and all that stuff. Like in Psalm chapter 2, it says, why do the nations rage and the people plot against each other? And it talks about a king who is mourning over his children fighting, and it said, you must kiss the Son and pay homage to him so that you can be blessed. And it's this is clearly a reflection of the Trinity. And once you get this idea, you read how the Bible talks about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and you realize, remember, separate in person, equal in being, and you have Jesus Christ in the water, and then the Father's voice saying, this is my Son with whom I am well pleased, and the Spirit falls on top of them, and you see the complete fullness of the Trinity there in person and being. And it's amazing, and that just gives me reason to fall more in love with them, because it sounds like it becomes more real to me, Well,
I think also almost like connecting the dots I remember I was an adult when someone pointed out, I was doing a Bible study and someone pointed out us in Genesis for the Holy Trinity. And I was like, man, once you see that, you can't unsee it.
Let us make man in our image.
Yeah. And so when you see that, you go, wow, okay, the Holy Trinity's been here the whole time.
Yeah.
And but it is something we overlook when we're just reading scripture, but it becomes important to connect the New and Old Testament together. Because, we do hear a lot, what's the point in the Old Testament?
But before, I don't want to go too far off topic. I want to talk real quick. There's a verse. We can
definitely do that.
We can totally do that. And I'm trying to stay in time here. But there's a passage. I use both a mixture of the epistles and the book of Acts to kind of create a picture of what I think this ministry should look like. We just finished a series going through Acts. And Whoa. Might have to cut that out. I don't know. One of my favorite passages in Acts is in Acts chapter 4, verse 32 through 37. I actually preached this to the youth group the other day. It says, "Now the entire group of those who believed were of one heart and mind, and no one claimed that any of his possessions was his own, but instead they held everything in common. With great power the apostles were giving testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was on all of them. For there was not a needy person among them, because all of those who owned land or houses sold them, brought the proceeds of what was sold, and laid them at the apostles' feet. This was then distributed to each person as any had need." And so, you see a picture here of a community of people that are sticking together through thick and thin, that are not only giving each other and not only submitting to each other by giving up their own possessions, but also giving each other their time and their heart and their love. Obviously they have their own families at home, but they're building a family in this, and it becomes a place of healing. It becomes a place of love. And man, the more I study this, the more I realize the church really is important, and it's so forgotten. One of the most amazing things is Ephesians. I talk about this sometimes. Ephesians 3. At the end of Ephesians 3, it says, "May we being the church, have power." So saying that us as people, let's all collectively have power together as his children. May God grant his people power to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is God's love for us. That as us being together, right, that just by us being together as a group and as a community, God starts to reveal and pour out his love to us. And then it says, "And to know Christ's love that surpasses knowledge, so that we as a people may be filled with the fullness of God." And John chapter 1 says, "For through Jesus Christ we have received grace through grace, that by grace we can experience his fullness." And so you see here that the fullness of God that is found by being with his people and worshiping and acknowledging the risen Christ together, that is where we see a true slice of heaven. This is where we really connect with God. So I usually use that when people be like, "Oh, we don't need to go to church. You read Ephesians?"
Well, it's also on a side slice of that is you see what tithing, what giving is supposed to look like and why, in a beautiful way, other than what we've made it. Because there's so much bad negativity. There's so much bad negativity, double negative.
Bad negativity.
There's so much negativity around giving to the church because they think our pastors are running around in airplanes, which is not the case for 99.9% of churches. And the way you see in the beginning of that scripture where people are giving away so that the ministry can grow, it's a beautiful picture of what tithing and giving is supposed to look like.
And I remember the way I explained this to the students is I'm not saying that you're whenever you're tithing, I'm not saying that you're not supposed to have things, but if you have enough money to buy a PlayStation 6 but you're not tithing,
right,
then there's something wrong. If you have enough to spend on yourself and still have extra, and that extra is not being given away or not being used to support the body of Christ, then I would argue that you're not being good stewards of the thing that God has given you.
Right. Being a Christian and living out the Great Commission is nothing but service. It's nothing but sacrifice and giving. It doesn't mean you have to give everything. It means that you have to understand that everything you have is of Christ first.
Right.
It was given to you by Christ, so it's not really yours.
I want to point out that we've already talked for about 45 minutes, almost an hour. and we haven't even covered the second section that we were going to cover.
I mean, that's what we do.
As we said, we talked for a while. These are so the kind of stuff that we talked about today. These are all little excerpts of the kind of discussions that we like to have behind closed doors, and obviously there's the humor and the jokes. And we could talk about this forever. I'm thinking in the future we could tell the story of the youth ministry and how we built it. But
wasn't that supposed to be the first thing we did?
That was supposed to be the first thing we did. So stay tuned. That'll be our cliffhanger. Stay tuned for episode 2, where we'll talk about the story of the ministry. But anyways, I want to actually transition into the second half of our show, which, as of right now, it's just titled Ministry Things.
Ministry things.
What I want to talk about real quick is this podcast itself and why we're doing this. So I want to follow a structure like we followed here, okay? Where we open up with a brief introduction, and the first half of this will actually talk about our own ministry, what's happening behind closed doors over here, the kids, what's going on. Like I was saying earlier, we might actually do a day where we talk about YEC, and then the second half of it.
And YEC is?
YEC, Youth Evangelism Celebration, a fantastic time of worship in Alexandria, Louisiana. Y'all need to sign up for that. Anyways, so we have, stuff like YEC, and we could talk about that for the first half. And the second half, we'll go outside of that and talk about youth conferences in general, worship sessions, passion conference, that kind of stuff. What is that for? How does that good for the body of Christ? How can that be harmful? And what do we as pastors and youth leaders respond to that with, And so I figured that today what we can do is we could talk about this podcast itself and what we want, what our vision for this is. And so would you like to share what some of your visions for this podcast is?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I want from this podcast is that, youth ministry can be difficult. And I want other people in youth ministry to connect to this. We want the kids to connect. We want youth and young adults to connect. But I think a part of it should also be, we want other youth leaders and other people who work with youth, or parents, or people who just generally have questions about, what it takes to lead the youth of America to, with Christ, and we want to hear from other. I know the weather is getting kind of scary outside.
Yeah.
But we want other youth ministers and leaders and people who work with youth to be a part of this. Send us questions. Send us their examples. What do you go through? Like, it's about looking at youth ministry as a whole, and how do we make it better, and how do we keep them connected?
I actually I've been thinking about doing this podcast for a while. And the thing that made me realize what I want this to look like was whenever a few months ago I was driving and I wanted to listen to a podcast. But every Christian podcast was either like, hey guys, today to talk about this theological concept, this is this and that, talking about that. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. I think those are great. You have stuff like Youth Group Chronicles, where two guys are like hanging out and having fun and reading through stories, and I like that as well. But I kind of want just like an opportunity to listen to two people just talk, two people banter and have fun. And I think that Youth Group Chronicles, and I think you said the Worship Problems, sorry, how like that's kind of a model of, shout out those guys, that's kind of a model of what I was hoping that we can aim for, so that we can both talk and the people who come to this ministry can feel connected. People who don't come to this ministry can just listen and hear our perspective, and also just like feel like they're hanging out,
And maybe learn something that not learn something, but it might spark something for them in their youth ministry, or make the kid,
give some ideas, or y'all can give us ideas,
Yeah, both.
Yeah. And so, like, what do I see for this podcast aside from the vibe, like I just said? I want a podcast to where anybody who actually comes to our stuff, youth ministry, young adults, we're doing Celebrate Recovery now and that kind of stuff, that they can actually tune in and listen and see behind the scenes of what we're talking about, what we have coming up, maybe hear about what's going on in our personal lives, and just another way to feel connected to this community that we're building. But then also so that other people can listen in and learn about this stuff. But then also, like, people on the other side of the world can hear this and maybe want to get connected with the community as well. We have a Discord server, by the way. We have an online, we're starting to build an online community. We're going to start releasing merch and other stuff. So technically, you can actually like watch our podcasts and then watch our posts and everything and not even be from Louisiana and still kind of receive the stuff that we're teaching over here. And I would really love it if that's able to reach people and maybe even see some change in some areas.
And we started to put, our worship and Wednesday night lessons are now online.
Did you see TJ commented?
No.
We posted all of our entire Wednesday night service the other day, and TJ commented, "That was amazing."
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love that. The only thing we don't post
at
though.
all. Amazing was spelled wrong. I love you, TJ.
I mean, the one thing that we won't post is let's talk about it. You have to experience that in person because it's personal, and so we don't want to post their personal thoughts. We ask them pretty
hard-hitting questions.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't post our Sunday school. Maybe one day we could post our young adults if it gets bigger, but as of right now, our youth lessons, we have. Now, I will say that if you want a taste of what we do talk about in Let's Talk About It, every Tuesday, the day before, Nikki actually will post a talk where she gives a preview of the Let's Talk About It, so you can still get what we're going to talk about. And like I said, we have merchandise. I would like to see if maybe this on a coffee mug one day. I really love this. I'm going to be so honest with you right now.
Very proud.
Very proud. Very proud of you, Isabella. It really works with this. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
Anyways. So yeah, that's kind of our vision for this podcast.
Also a way for the kids to see us in a different light. For us to also, as a youth minister and a youth leader, to share what we're going through as an outlet. Because we need an outlet too, sometimes to go, is anybody else experiencing this? Because I feel like we're crazy, or,
Yeah. Another thing I think would be cool is that like we could also have guest speakers in, and maybe even like start rotating some hosts every now and then. Like if you can't be here, I'll have Emily sit in. If I can't be here, I'll have somebody else sit in. Or maybe you and Emily can talk. And I think it'd be cool if, like, let's say God calls me to go pastor somewhere else. Well, we've already built this community. I could just have somebody else host.
Easy. Don't go anywhere.
I don't plan on it. I'm just saying.
He's already leaving the podcast. We just day one.
Look, everything, just so y'all know, everything that I do, I try to build something that can self-replicate because it is important to me that in the same way that the disciples were called to go and make disciples, that I feel like ministries are called to go and make ministries, and churches are called to go and build churches because that's what the apostles did. And so I feel like everything under a ministry umbrella needs to follow the same mindset, honestly.
Well, I used to have a boss who and a mentor that's taught me the bus theory. So you should always be set up so if you get hit by a bus, can your operation still run? I mean, it's kind of brutal, but
That is a crazy example, but it works. It works. It works.
I mean, that wasn't in a church. That was just in a jab.
And yeah, I don't know if y'all can see this. I'm hoping that like as we get better cameras and everything, we can kind of expand the perspective. But I always make sure to wear crazy socks every day. So if y'all, I don't know if y'all can see it right now, but in case y'all are wondering,
you have to put your leg up like a good ballet dancer.
Sock check. There we go. We have Shrek and donkey heads floating around. I also have regular Shrek socks. I have donkey socks. Somebody gave me a Ted Lasso socks, and I watched a bit of the show. I don't know if I can represent Ted Lasso in a ministry setting. I also haven't watched the show in its full, so I don't know that much about it. But with that said, those socks are
both inspiring and inappropriate. So
those socks are really comfortable, though. So that's the problem. I have a Marvin the Martian one. I call them the Flintstone Fives. So I have Fred Flintstone and I always forget, what is Fred Flintstone's best friend?
Barney?
Barney Flintstone. Not Barney Flintstone. Barney.
Is it Barney?
Is it Barney? Bobby?
I think it's Barney.
My brain wanted to say Fred and Ted.
No.
Oh, that sounds like it could be.
That's Bill and Ted.
Fred and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
The fact that you know that reference, being born in 2001, was great.
I am cultured, all right? I mean,
cultured,
bit, I guess.
I don't know if Bill and Ted is cultured.
I feel like Bill and Ted is the opposite of culture. Oh yeah, wait. You ever watch SpongeBob?
Yeah.
You gotta have the pinky up. When in doubt, pinky out.
That's just good etiquette.
The higher the pinky, the fancier we are, and this is a fancy podcast.
Well, we say in the South, up in North Louisiana, the higher the hair. Oh, I did that on purpose. Up in the north, the higher the hair, the closer to Jesus.
Well, I mean, I guess my hair is technically higher. It's funny because like people tell me all the time I don't sound like I'm from Louisiana because I don't have an accent. I don't have an explanation for that. My grandmother has a very strong Cajun accent. So does on both sides of my family, and both of my parents have the flattest, most suburban, white accents. You know, like just straight no accent, and that's how I am. And it's funny because Emily is the exact same way. She's from New Orleans. She has family that's from like the rural part of New Orleans, where like in Chalmette area, where everybody has that slightly Italian-ish accent. She doesn't have that.
Well, I actually have an accent, but someone told me a long time ago in business to cover it up, so I learned to talk without it. But really, if I were to drop it, I sound pretty country. I always say, sometimes I'll sound really country and I'll go, oh, the cornbread came out.
He's one of my favorite actors, though. He's really, really talented.
Yeah, I liked him in Peaky Blinders.
I don't know what that is. I've never seen it. Well, okay, I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
Yeah, don't watch it.
I've been told to watch the Mad Max series.
Oh. Just remember, wherever you go, there you are. Used to be my voicemail on my phone because it was a Mad Max reference back in the day. I love Mad Max.
Yeah, I like how I mentioned earlier.
Speaking of Mad Max and apocalyptic, you, on your lesson Wednesday, I learned something new.
What?
Like what apocalypse actually meant. And
I was really proud of that last time.
I mean, it was really good. I was sitting back there and I was like, oh, learned something after 30 years and
yeah, the word apocalypse is Greek for unveiling. I mentioned that there is another apocalypse called the Apocalypse of Daniel. That's the other apocalyptic text in the Old Testament. I'm gonna actually pull up one of my favorite passages of all time. So if you want to know like a brief difference between apocalypse and a regular prophecy, by the way, I'm still in seminary. If I get something wrong, I am sorry. But from my understanding, the difference between a prophecy and an apocalypse is a prophecy is a message from God about like the heart of his people, showing his own heart and saying, hey, this is something that's going to happen if you don't do this, or this is something that has happened. Like the book of Genesis is a prophecy. I didn't know that. Like the 7 days of creation is written in prophetic language. And so prophecy is just an image or picture from God. It's not a foretelling of the future. Whereas an apocalypse is an actual unveiling. And so you read Hosea chapter 8. At the beginning it says, put the ram's horn to your mouth. One like an eagle comes against the house of the Lord because they transgress my covenant and rebel against my law. You're talking about something that's happening right now. Like an eagle, somebody is coming. Someone is coming in and swooping in and attacking the house of the Lord. He is describing what's happening. But then watch here. Ezekiel can be pretty apocalyptic as well. But I know for sure Daniel is. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 9. Now, how I just described the prophecy, this is an apocalyptic message right here. As I kept watching, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took a seat. His clothing was white as snow, the hair of his head the whitest wool. His throne was flaming fire, its wheels were blazing fire. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from his presence. Thousands upon thousands served him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was convened, and the books were opened. I watched then, because of the sound of the arrogant words the horn was speaking. As I continued watching, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to the burning fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was removed, but an extension of life was granted to them for a certain period of time. I continued watching in the night, and suddenly, one like the Son of Man was coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was escorted before him. He was given dominion and glory and a kingdom so that those of every people, nation, and language shall serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will never pass away. His kingdom is one that will not be destroyed. This was written hundreds of years before the coming Christ. And that is an apocalyptic message. That is why when we look at Revelation, we have to interpret it in two ways. First of all, this is the end times, because in the same way that Daniel described what the coming of Christ would look like, the Revelation does that as well. But also, there's not actually going to be a dragon. Like, Revelation is very symbolic in the way that this is. But also...
It'd be cool if there was a dragon.
But also, the book of Daniel, some of their prophecies was very applicable to that day, because in the same way it talks about God dismantling a kingdom, the kingdom of Babylon got dismantled by the Macedonians and the Romans and everything. And so, like, when you read the apocalyptic messages like Revelation and Daniel, you need to consider, how can this apply to me today? What is this saying about what's happening now? But what is this going to say for us in the future?
Yeah.
Anyways, those are the kind of things that we're going to have here. Yeah.
We're talking about Mad Max, and we get a message out of that.
I could totally write a lesson on Mad Max.
Oh, we should just do movie themes for like...
Movie themes?
Well, yeah. This last month I did like this whole Star Wars where I watched everything Star Wars.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
In a month I watched everything from beginning to end in chronological order, and then every reference for the next 2 weeks was like the Force in finding God and the message. It's very it does follow that Christian theme if you think about it.
What's funny is that I grew up reading comic books, and whenever movies come out that are comic book movies, I try to educate myself on what happens in the comic books. And so either I will be very disappointed or I will be very happy with how it turns out. And I'm finding that, like, I am in a category of people that hates media that a lot of people love and loves media that a lot of people hate. Like the new Superman movie got a lot of hate for different reasons, but I'm like, this is just like that one book. This is like you mentioned the other day that, like, oh, you don't like how Supergirl's trashy in the movie. It's like, girl, I don't know if you want to read the comic books then, because that's just how she is.
They could have made her a little less messy. That's all I meant. I love the new Superman. I thought it was nice that it felt more like the comics. It felt more like if I were to go back in time and watch the original Superman on TV, it had that feel. Fantastic Four, same thing. It had that feel.
Have you read the synopsis for the Supergirl movie? Because I think you'd love it.
No.
So the synopsis for the Supergirl movie, she's going out and partying to celebrate her 21st birthday, where she ends up encountering a girl who ran away from home, and her entire mission is to save her from people that, like, I'm probably getting this completely wrong, but either way, she's accompanied by some child, and she goes on an adventure to help her, and she has to fight villains like Lobo and other things, and that's where she becomes a coming-of-age story, and she learns to take care of herself.
Oh, I might like it after all.
And Crypto's in it too, so that's why we know it's going to be good.
I mean, the dog is so good.
Yeah, I know. Whenever the movie was like the trailers and everything were coming out, someone was like, Superman doesn't have a dog. I said, Superman's always had a dog. No, he hasn't. I watched the movie since 1973. Crypto was debuted in 1953, 1955. No, he wasn't. Looks it up. Oh, yeah.
Well, that's the difference in knowing just movie or knowing the canon.
I'm just glad that we don't have any Golden Age Superman out here. That stuff was... Yes. All right. Anyways, we're going everywhere. But we actually just reached the amount of time that we have. It's 2:15. We started at 1:08.
It's 2:15 already.
It's been an hour. I know. But I'm actually...
I was like, are we going to be able to talk for an hour? I knew better than that. We talked so much.
I actually really liked how this went. So we're still working on, working some stuff out. Like, I don't know what our intro is going to be like, what our outro is going to be like. But please stay tuned. Follow us on Instagram, Test Students, at Test Students. We're probably going to post this on Spotify, maybe Apple Music. Like, we're trying to build something, and I just want you guys to be here and support us as we build it. So do you have any closing words? Any words of wisdom?
I don't know. Make good choices. Love Jesus and make good choices.
Let me think. Words of wisdom. Don't give your crayons to wombats. All right, that's it for the day. It was great talking to y'all, and I don't know how else to end this. So we'll just end it. We'll end it here. All right.
Bye.
Later.